My name is Isolde Quinn, 26 years old. The champagne flutes shivered on their trays like nervous birds, and 200 faces sharpened in my direction as if the evening itself had grown teeth. My left cheek burned, a sun pinned to my skin, heat rippling outward until even the string quartet seemed to hold a note in its throat. My veil sat crooked, knocked askew by the same hand now hovering in the air, fingers curled as though they couldn't quite believe what they'd done. His sister, red lips barely bent, watched from behind him with the clinical interest of someone timing an experiment. The June breeze froze. So did I. Then, steady as if a spine had been forged in the fire of that slap, I smiled. Let me take you back to the moment the match was struck. I first met Julian Clark in a funeral home parking lot. Asphalt soft with heat, lawnmowers singing down the block. My mother had just died, pancreatic cancer, swift and merciless, and the air tasted of cut grass and exhaust. The black dress gripped my ribs like a vice. The only thing holding me together were my palms flattened against the warm car hood. Footsteps on gravel. You look like you need this more than I do, he said, offering a silver flask that caught the light. I don't drink with strangers, I answered, because that's what a person with rules says when the rules have already failed them. Good policy, he replied. I'm Julian. He took a sip first, then offered it again, and grief shifted enough in my chest to let whiskey in. We didn't trade the right words, only the honest absence of them. Who did you lose? My aunt. You? My mom. We passed the flask like a metronome for breathing. He had sea-glass eyes, gray-green, calm water over deep places. He said he developed real estate. His family had money that preferred a whisper to a shout. We stood a long time without filling the silence, and in that shared vacancy, he slipped into my life. He courted me the old-fashioned way. Flowers materialized on my desk at the accounting firm where I was a junior. Nobody with ink-stained thumbs and a fondness for reconciling things that wanted to come apart. Dinners in dining rooms where the waiters knew his name and mine felt like a borrowed coat. Weekend inns with rain on their windows and starched sheets and the soft ache of being wanted. Everyone else wants something from me, he murmured once, tracing my spine. You just want me. I believed him because wanting to believe is a form of thirst. I met Veronica at brunch 6 months in. She was 20 minutes late, winter rose perfume arriving first, the price of her white dress ticking like a meter in my head. She kissed Julian's cheeks, turned to me, and offered a limp hand. So, you're the accountant. Not nice to meet you. Not I've heard so much. Just a profession set down like a napkin. I smiled as if my stomach hadn't dropped. That's right. How quaint, she said, scanning the menu. Julian always had a thing for strays. Veronica, he warned lightly, warmth flickering over ice. She shrugged. Just saying he's full of surprises. The waiter arrived, and the moment slid past with the bright clatter of cutlery, but her eyes had already measured the distance between what I had and what they owned. He proposed on the anniversary of my mother's death. He took me back to that parking lot, but the asphalt had transformed. String lights braided the trees. A violinist drew sound like silk. Rose petals mapped a path to the place where grief had once made a nest. You made me believe in second chances, he said, voice unsteady. He knelt with a ring that trapped the last light of the day. Marry me. I said yes. The platinum circled my finger with a weight that felt like belonging and like debt. Both truths hummed. Planning was a carousel. Dress fittings, cake tastings, vendor meetings, where I learned how a life could be constructed like a house, all crown molding and no closet. Veronica installed herself as maid of honor. We're going to be sisters, she said, squeezing my hand. We should be close. At each appointment, I caught her watching me from a mirror's edge. Sometimes she tilted toward Julian and whispered, and a small cloud crossed his face before he smoothed it away. What does she keep telling you? I asked one evening after the florist. Nothing important, he said too quickly. She's stressed. He kissed me and changed the subject to venues and vineyards, and the kind of china you inherit like a verdict. 3 months before the wedding, I stared at 2 pink lines in a bathroom stall at work, while the air vent rattled a thin hymn. My hand shook so badly I had to sit on the closed toilet to breathe. Worth the wait. Tiny letters on a cotton onesie I bought on my lunch break, the joke catching in my throat because life refuses to honor scheduling. We'd said we'd wait a year after the wedding, but a new heartbeat doesn't read calendars. I tucked the little gift into tissue paper, then into my purse, then into the pocket of my body where hope burrows. I decided to tell him that night. I had a key to his apartment. I let myself in. The lights were low. Voices threaded the hallway, Julian's and a woman's. My heart flinched, then steadied when I recognized Veronica's tone, a thin blade rubbed on stone. I shouldn't have listened. I did. You have to tell her before the wedding, Veronica insisted. It's cruel to let her walk in blind. I can't, Julian answered, voice roughened by something like fear. If she knows, she'll leave. Then maybe she should. This is a disaster waiting to happen. A pause. Then Veronica's voice turned cool. I did the research, Julian. Her financial history is a mess. Credit cards, student loans, a bankruptcy at 22. I pressed a hand to my mouth. I had been a wreck once, half job, half crisis, a stack of bills taller than hope. I had clawed out, statement by statement, like a diver kicking for air. That wasn't a secret. It was a scar that had thickened into skin. That's not who she is now, Julian said, and the flicker of his defense almost steadied me until Veronica's next sentence. Wake up. She saw dollar signs and latched on, just like, his voice cracked like a door slammed. Don't compare her to Mom. Silence fell so hard my ears rang. When Veronica spoke again, the softness cut sharper. I'm trying to protect you. You remember what happened when Dad let a woman climb inside his grief and walk away with half of everything? I won't let you repeat his stupidity. I backed away from the door as if it were an altar burning my knees. The onesie was a stone in my purse. I left without turning on a light, my reflection a ghost in the entry mirror. On the sidewalk, the evening had cooled. I stood among people on their way somewhere and realized I was between lives. In the weeks that followed, my doubts multiplied with the discipline of cells. At the bridal shower Veronica hosted, laughter had the brittle ring of glass. You'll sign a prenup, of course, someone said between bites of sugared fruit. When I replied that it hadn't come up, the room performed a single synchronized blink. Veronica smiled like a blade wrapped in ribbon. How modern of you both. That night I asked Julian. He shifted, uneasy. My lawyer mentioned it, he admitted, and I said no. I trust you. He pivoted to a kiss before the conversation could find its feet. Trust tasted like something he wanted to talk himself into. The morning of the wedding, I vomited twice and told everyone it was nerves. In the dressing room, Veronica's perfume arrived before she did, frost over roses. You look beautiful, she said, and for a moment I wanted to believe the words could build a bridge. Julian is terrified of becoming our father, she added, watching me through the mirror. He's afraid of being used. Be patient with him. I'm not using him, I whispered to my own reflection. I know, she replied smoothly. You know, just protect him too. Her fingers pressed my shoulder as if testing a piece of fruit for bruises. The ceremony unfolded like a memory someone else had rehearsed for me. The aisle, my uncle's arm steady at my side, Julian in a black tux, like a promise, the officiant's words about partnership that skimmed the surface of what we were refusing to say. Vows, rings, kiss. Applause swelled, petals drifted, the sun glittered on glass. I tasted salt and couldn't tell whose tears had made it to my mouth. At the reception, the light turned honey thick. His hand sat at the small of my back, warm and proprietorial, and for a moment I let myself rest against it. I need to speak with my father, he murmured, kissing my temple. He stepped toward the rose bushes where Veronica appeared as if grown from them. I watched her place a folded paper in his palm. His face changed while reading, ice forming over water. The paper crumpled in his fist. The crowd parted in front of him like tall grass before a storm. He walked toward me with a silence that roared. Is it true? He asked, voice low enough to hurt. Is what true? But his hand moved faster than the words. The slap cracked the air. The quartet stalled. My veil slipped. Blood salted my tongue. I touched my face, met his eyes, and saw a stranger carrying my future like a weapon. Behind him, Veronica's hand half covered her mouth in the exact shape of a smile that didn't reach her eyes. I straightened. The burn became a line of flame I could walk. Ask me what you think I did, I said, voice level. Say it out loud. Here. He swallowed, rage clinking against humiliation. You've been stealing from my company, he said, louder now. Funneling money to an offshore account. $500,000. Your name is on the transfers. The crowd inhaled, a single body. Somewhere a champagne flute chimed itself to the ground. I held out my hand. Show me. Julian's jaw tightened. The paper, crumpled, sweating in his fist, unfolded with a sound like tearing skin. Bank statements. Transaction logs. Account numbers highlighted in yellow. My name repeated across the page like a verdict. The crowd leaned in, drawn by the gravity of ruin. These are fake, I said evenly, though the words scraped my throat raw. Don't lie to me. His voice cracked, half rage, half disbelief. My lawyer verified the transfers. The account exists. Your signature is on every authorization. Then your lawyer, I said, is either incompetent or complicit. Behind him, Veronica touched his sleeve gently, playing the role of peacemaker. Julian, this isn't the place. This is exactly the place, I said, stepping forward. Let everyone see. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Even the string quartet, frozen since the slap, hadn't lowered their bows. All those faces, guests, family, employees, hung in the amber dusk, waiting for my collapse. I gave them something else. I have never stolen a single dollar from my husband, I said, my voice rising. I have never opened an offshore account. I have never signed any of those transfers. Veronica's eyes narrowed just slightly. That was all I needed. Because I'm an accountant, I continued, and for the last 6 months I've been reviewing every transaction in Clark Development, preparing to merge our finances after the wedding. I know the ledgers better than anyone, including you. I crossed to a nearby table where my maid of honor's purse lay abandoned, pulled out my phone, and opened my email folder, the one labeled for when I need proof. Numbers, documents, invoices filled the screen. These, I said, holding the phone up so the sun flashed against the glass, are the real records. Murmurs rippled through the guests, phones tilted toward me. Somewhere a camera flashed. And do you know what I found while reviewing them? I asked. Money shifting between shell companies, payments to vendors that don't exist, invoices for work that was never done. It's not me you need to worry about, Julian. It's your sister. A collective gasp, sharp as wind through glass. Veronica blinked once. Then she laughed. That's insane. Why would I steal from my own family? Because your father cut you off 2 years ago after you gambled through your trust fund, I said. Because your debts could bury you. Because you saw your brother's company as a lifeline. Lies, she hissed. Then explain this. I swiped through my phone, projecting a spreadsheet toward the curious faces nearest me. Every shell company used to funnel money links back to a single law firm. Your boyfriend's, the one you keep hidden because your family wouldn't approve. Julian turned pale. Veronica, her mask cracked for half a breath. Then she composed herself, the frost returning. She's manipulating you, Julian. Look at her. She's unraveling. I stepped closer until I could see my reflection in her pupils. You almost got away with it, I whispered. The routing numbers matched too perfectly. You used the same one for multiple transfers. I caught it weeks ago, but didn't understand what I was seeing until now. The garden had gone utterly still. I could hear the fountain, the faint whine of cicadas. Julian's voice was barely audible. Veronica, is this true? She looked at him, then at the crowd, calculating. For a moment I saw it, the child beneath the diamonds, the sister terrified of being second. Then her face went smooth. You stupid little girl, she said softly to me. You think this is about money? What else could it be? It's about love. She smiled then, awful and calm. He never loved you, not really. Every doubt I planted, every question I asked, was just shining a light on what was already there. Stop, Julian muttered, but she kept going. Tell her, Veronica said. Tell her about the private investigator you hired before the wedding. Tell her how you had him dig through her past. The crowd stirred again. My vision tunneled. You did what? Julian's mouth opened and closed. I needed to be sure. You didn't trust me. I wanted to. And instead you hired someone to spy on me. You hit me, I said, voice low. You hit me in front of everyone, and you believed her. Shame flickered across his face, but it was too late. I reached into my purse and pulled out the tiny parcel, the onesie wrapped in tissue paper. I was going to tell you tonight, I said. 8 weeks. I was going to surprise you. But congratulations, Julian. You're going to be a father, with a woman you don't trust, who you've just humiliated in front of 200 witnesses. The gasp that followed was almost physical. Guests lifted their phones higher. Veronica's composure slipped entirely. I tossed the onesie at his feet. You wanted proof of my loyalty? There it is. And here's something else. You'll never touch me or our child again. I turned to the crowd, raising my chin. Thank you all for coming, I said. At least now everyone knows what kind of man he is. Behind me, Julian called my name, but I was already walking, down the garden path, across the marble steps, past the gate where the valet stared in shock. My uncle's car waited, engine running. As the door shut behind me, the sound of chaos burst open, shouting, sobbing, the orchestra scraping back into noise. By the time we reached the end of the drive, my phone was vibrating nonstop. Calls, messages, videos already being uploaded. The slap heard around the internet. By midnight, it was viral. The following week blurred into courtroom air conditioning and sleepless nights. I ignored Julian's calls, blocked his number, deleted his emails. His lawyer served divorce papers within 7 days. Mine countered with her own, a legal surgeon slicing through the remnants of our marriage with quiet precision. We demanded everything: community assets, emotional damages, and an internal audit of Clark Development. The audit I'd begun in secret became public record. Numbers that once whispered now screamed. Over $5 million misappropriated through Veronica's network of shell companies. The police raided her apartment first, then her boyfriend's office. The news ran with it. Heiress behind $5 fraud scheme. Julian's empire began to collapse. His father, already frail, suffered a heart attack under the weight of scandal. I watched the coverage with no satisfaction, only a strange, exhausted quiet. One morning, my lawyer called. They want to settle, she said. Veronica's confessing. You're officially clear. I stood at my apartment window as dawn peeled itself from the skyline. The city was washed clean, indifferent. My reflection stared back, hair loose, face pale, a faint bruise still shadowing my cheekbone. Freedom didn't feel like victory. It felt like the moment after thunder, when the air still shakes. The tabloids named me the slapped bride. It was supposed to humiliate me, but I let it spread. Because the truth has a strange way of using shame as fertilizer. By morning, the footage of Julian's hand meeting my cheek had looped across every screen, slowed down, zoomed in, dissected. Commentators argued, was it justified anger or unthinkable abuse? Strangers debated my character as if they'd been at the reception themselves, but underneath the noise, something shifted. Women wrote me messages, thousands. I saw myself in you. Thank you for not crying. Thank you for walking away. That week, I met with the investigators from Clark Development's board, men in pressed suits, their voices trimmed of warmth. They wanted to understand how I'd spotted the fraud. I didn't, I admitted. Not at first. I just saw patterns that didn't fit. Patterns? One asked. Same vendor name, different tax ID, recurring invoice numbers, 1 digit off. Money that moved like someone trying to hide a heartbeat. They looked at me differently after that, not as a scandal, but as an analyst. 3 months passed between the wedding and the court hearing, enough time for Veronica's empire of shell companies to crumble. Her boyfriend, attorney, co-conspirator, fall guy, cut a deal. She refused one. I was subpoenaed as the key witness. The courtroom smelled of old wood and nerves. Veronica entered in gray, still immaculate, but smaller somehow, her perfume replaced by the metallic tang of fear. Julian sat at the defense table beside her, gaunt and sleepless. Our eyes met once. He looked away first. I took the stand, swore the oath, and opened the same folder I'd started for love and finished for survival. This spreadsheet, I said, documents over 300 transactions routed through companies registered under false addresses. The routing numbers connect directly to accounts owned by Veronica Clark. Her attorney objected. The judge overruled. Julian dropped his head into his hands. When I stepped down, he whispered, "Isolde, please." "Don't," I said. "Not here." The verdict came swiftly. Guilty on all counts. 5 million stolen. 7 years of deceit. She was remanded pending sentencing. Afterward, outside the courthouse, the air smelled like rain on hot pavement. Reporters shouted questions. Flashbulbs split the gray light. I said only one thing. Truth doesn't need to shout. It just waits. 2 months later, I left New York. My uncle, my mother's brother, helped me pack the last box. "You sure about this?" he asked. "I can't breathe here," I said simply. He nodded. "Then go where the air's clean." San Diego had sunlight like forgiveness. I rented a small apartment near the ocean. By day, I freelanced, consulting on audits for firms too embarrassed to admit their books were bleeding. By night, I built something new, Quinn Forensics. It was just me, a secondhand laptop, and a single rule: find the truth no one else wants found. Then Grace arrived. 8 pounds of defiance, lungs like sirens. She had Julian's gray-green eyes and my mother's chin. When the nurse placed her in my arms, I whispered, "You are everything that survived the fire." For a while, the world went quiet. Feedings, spreadsheets, ocean walks. I thought maybe peace had finally learned my name, until the custody summons arrived. Julian wanted visitation rights. His lawyer phrased it gently, like a favor. "He's been through anger management, Ms. Quinn. He just wants to see his daughter." My lawyer filed the video of the slap as Exhibit A. The judge's face was carved from marble. "You struck your pregnant wife in public," she said to Julian. "You will have supervised visitation only, pending completion of therapy. You will pay child support." Julian nodded, eyes down. The veins in his temples stood out like blue wire. I watched without hatred, just a hollow kind of recognition. How quickly love could rot when built on fear. After the hearing, I carried Grace out into the sunlight. She gripped my finger tight as if anchoring me to the earth. That night, as she slept, I opened my laptop. On the screen glowed a new client inquiry. Subject: suspected embezzlement. Please help. I smiled. Full circle. Years unfolded quietly, measured in Grace's milestones. Her first word wasn't mama or dada. It was light. She said it pointing at the window one morning, sun pouring across the crib bars. Work grew. Word spread that I was the accountant who caught the heiress. Soon, law firms hired me to dissect complex fraud cases. Each time I traced a false invoice, each time I uncovered a missing sum, I felt something heal, like stitching my own wound from the inside out. Then, one evening, Grace 6 months old, the surf humming beyond the balcony, my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. "Isolde," the voice said. Julian's voice. Older somehow, roughened. I froze. "What do you want?" "I just thought you should know. Veronica was sentenced today. 15 years. Federal. She'll serve 12, maybe." "I know," I said. "I read about it." Silence swelled. I could hear him breathing, the rhythm uneven. "I'm sorry," he said finally. "For everything. You were right about all of it. I didn't trust you. I let her poison me, and I hit you. I hate myself for that every day." "Good," I said. He exhaled, a sound between relief and pain. "How's Grace?" "She's perfect. You'll see her next month at your supervised visit." "Yes." A pause. "Are you happy?" I looked around. At the bassinet, the warm lamp, the small apartment filled with salt air and baby laughter. "Yes," I said, "I am." "That's good." His voice cracked. "I really did love you, you know. I just didn't know how to trust it." "I know," I said softly, "but that's not enough." "If I could go back." "You can't." He swallowed audibly. "Goodbye, Isolde." "Goodbye, Julian." When the call ended, I stood by the window and watched the moon pull its silver thread across the water. I thought about the woman I'd been on that wedding day, waiting for permission to believe she was enough. She was gone. I didn't feel victorious. I felt free. California sunlight had a way of bleaching the noise out of things. The ocean didn't care who you'd been, only that you kept moving. I built a life around that principle. Grace and I rented a small apartment above a coffee shop that smelled like roasted almonds and surf wax. Mornings began with her laughter bouncing off the kitchen tiles, the sound of cartoons mixing with the seagulls outside. I worked from the dining table, laptop, case files, endless coffee. Quinn Forensics had grown from a whisper to a business. Clients called from across the country, desperate for proof that they weren't crazy, that the numbers really were lying to them. Sometimes, when Grace napped, I'd scroll through old court documents from the Clark case. Not out of bitterness, more like checking a healed scar. Veronica was 2 years into her sentence by then. Her boyfriend had testified against her and disappeared into witness protection. Julian's company, stripped and restructured, limped along under a new CEO. The Clark name had become a cautionary tale in business schools. One afternoon, I received a letter from Julian's lawyer, a formal request for updated visitation. He'd completed therapy, volunteered at a crisis center, even written letters of accountability to victims' support groups. I didn't know whether to be impressed or exhausted. The judge granted him supervised weekends twice a month. The first time he came to see Grace, she hid behind my leg. He knelt to her height. "Hi, Grace. I'm your dad." His voice was gentle, uncertain. She studied him with the curiosity of a scientist observing a rare animal. Then she nodded once, solemnly, and offered him her favorite stuffed rabbit. "Her name's Clover." He smiled, a real one, the kind that hurt to look at because it reminded me of a time before everything curdled. "Nice to meet you, Clover," he said. I watched from the doorway, arms folded, heart hammering in that strange rhythm of nostalgia and detachment. It was like watching a ghost learn to speak again. When Grace turned 2, we moved into a small house near the cliffs. White walls, creaky floors, sea view from the porch. My uncle visited often, pretending he didn't worry about us. He'd bring groceries and news clippings. "You've become quite the myth," he said once, laying a newspaper down where my name was buried, beneath a headline about financial abuse awareness. "You realize you've started a movement?" I shrugged. People just needed a story that proves survival isn't uglier than love. But sometimes, late at night, after Grace fell asleep, I'd still dream of the garden, the slap, the silence, the eyes. I'd wake drenched in sweat, the salt taste of blood ghosting my tongue. Healing, I learned, wasn't linear. It looped. 2 years later, another letter arrived. Handwritten this time. No return address. For 2 days, I didn't open it. It sat on the counter beside Grace's finger paints, white envelope slowly gathering coffee rings. On the third morning, curiosity won. "Isolde," it began, "you don't know me, but I know you." I shared a cell with Veronica Clark for 8 months. She asked me to send this after her transfer to federal custody. Inside was a second envelope, thick, cream paper, sealed in red wax. My stomach twisted as I broke it open. "Isolde, I suppose you expected me to die pretending I was innocent. But prison has a way of stripping vanity. I won't apologize for what I did to Julian's company. I am sorry for what I did to you. You were collateral damage in a war you didn't know existed. You walked into our family believing love was enough. I wanted to prove you wrong. And I did. But I didn't win. You did. You walked away and I stayed. Maybe that's justice. Maybe it's mercy. Take care of Grace. She'll never know how much of me burned with envy for what you had. The courage to start over. Don't waste it." V. I read it twice, then folded it carefully and set it in the sink. When the flame reached my fingers, I let it go. Grace woke from her nap crying. I held her close until she fell asleep again, her breath warm against my shoulder. The smell of smoke clung to my hair, faint and sweet, like the closing of a door. By the time Grace turned 3, the nightmares had dulled into echoes. Work filled the space where memory once gnawed. I specialized in economic coercion, cases where partners hid money, manipulated finances, turned love into ledgers. I testified in court. I trained other auditors. I told victims, "The numbers tell a story. Let's read it together." And still life surprised me. One evening, a knock at the door. When I opened it, Julian stood on the porch, hands shoved into his pockets. He looked older, smaller, like a man who'd spent too long rehearsing apologies he didn't expect anyone to hear. "I shouldn't be here," he said quietly, "but I needed to give you this." He held out a thick envelope, embossed with legal seals. "What is it?" "Veronica died 2 weeks ago," he said. "Lung cancer. It was fast." I blinked. The words didn't land, just floated, meaningless, until they found weight. "Why are you telling me?" "Because she left something for Grace." He extended the envelope again. "Please." Inside was a trust document. $2 million in Grace's name. Untouchable until she turned 25. Attached was a short note in Veronica's handwriting. "For the girl I'll never meet. So she'll never have to marry for safety. So she'll know love doesn't need permission." I stared at the page until the words blurred. "She left this?" "She spent the last year arranging it," Julian said. "It's airtight. can't be contested. It doesn't erase anything, I said. I know, he replied, but maybe it can build something new. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The wind moved between us, smelling of salt and eucalyptus. He looked thinner, but the fury that once lived in his eyes was gone, replaced by something steadier. I'm in therapy, he said finally. Real therapy, not the court kind. I'm trying to understand the damage my family passed down, and the damage I passed to you. I'm not asking for forgiveness. Good, I said and meant it. He gave a small, weary nod. You were the best thing that ever happened to me, Isolde, even though I ruined it. He turned to leave. Julian, I called after him. He stopped. Thank you, I said. He gave a faint, sad smile. Take care of her. Then he was gone, swallowed by the dusk. That night, Grace built towers with her blocks, teetering, colorful castles. Look, Mama, she said. It's strong. I smiled. Nothing can knock it down, right? Nothing, she said, eyes bright. I kissed the top of her head. That's all that matters. I tucked the trust papers into a drawer, closed it, and watched the last light fade from the window. Outside, the waves kept folding over themselves, destroying, rebuilding, destroying again. Freedom, I realized, wasn't a destination. It was maintenance. Time, I learned, is a patient architect. It doesn't rebuild what you lost. It teaches you to live around the ruins. By the time Grace turned 7, the trust fund had gathered dust in a locked drawer. I never touched it. I couldn't decide if accepting it meant forgiveness or just acknowledging that redemption sometimes wears expensive paper. Our home near the cliffs had weathered into something warm and alive. There were drawings taped to the refrigerator, cereal crumbs forever underfoot, the scent of salt and crayons mixing in the morning light. Quinn Forensics had expanded. 2 employees now shared my obsession for tracing truth through numbers. We worked from the converted garage where spreadsheets met sea breeze. Sometimes I caught Grace at the window staring out at the horizon. What are you thinking about? I'd ask. If the ocean ever gets tired, she said once. Of what? Coming and going all the time. I smiled. Maybe it doesn't get tired because it knows that's just what it's made to do. Julian remarried when Grace was 8. I heard through our lawyers first, then saw the photos online. A quiet ceremony in Oregon, a therapist named Elise by his side, a little boy clinging to his leg. I stared at the image longer than I wanted to admit. He looked peaceful. When he came for supervised visits, we spoke with civility, not warmth. He'd sit with Grace on the porch, helping her build sandcastles out of kinetic sand, patient and gentle in ways I hadn't thought him capable of. Therapy had changed him, or maybe humiliation had. Either way, I didn't feel vengeance anymore, just distance. One evening after a visit, he lingered by his car. She's happy, he said quietly. You've done incredible with her. She's her own miracle, I replied. She looks like you when she laughs. She laughs because she doesn't know the world can break that way yet. He nodded, eyes glassy. Let's make sure she never has to find out. That night, I realized forgiveness wasn't a single act. It was maintenance, too, like freedom. Something you keep polishing, even if the metal underneath will never gleam the same. A few months later, a registered letter arrived from Oregon. Inside was Veronica's final estate update, proof that the trust fund was now active and earning. The lawyer's note said she wanted it secured beyond question. I folded the papers and slid them back into the drawer. Your aunt made sure you'd never have to depend on anyone, I whispered to Grace's photo on the fridge. Not even me. That weekend, Grace found me in the office, flipping through case files. Mama, what's money for? She asked, sudden and serious. For choices, I said. The right kind can keep you free. Like you? Like us. Uncle Peter died the following spring, the man who'd walked me down the aisle, the last piece of my old life. Grace, 11 now, insisted on writing the eulogy herself. She stood in front of the small crowd, hands shaking, voice steady. Uncle Peter said people are like houses. You don't knock them down when one room is messy. You help them clean it. That's what he did for us. When she finished, there wasn't a dry eye in the chapel. After the service, Julian approached quietly. He was a good man, he said. The best, I answered. He hesitated, then added, You were right about the damage. I still go to therapy. I'm still learning. Good, I said softly. Keep learning. We planted a tree for my uncle overlooking the cliffs. Grace hung a seashell from one branch. So he can always hear the ocean, she explained. Years blurred again. Grace became 13, then 16, all limbs and questions and fire. Sometimes, I'd catch her scrolling through old headlines about the slapped bride. "Was that really you?" she asked one night, half awe, half disbelief. "It was," I admitted. "Why did you stay so calm?" "Because screaming wouldn't have changed the truth." "Were you scared?" "Terrified." "But you did it anyway." "Yes." She thought about that, brow furrowed. "Do you still love him?" "I love who I thought he was," I said, "but that person never existed." She nodded slowly, as if tucking the lesson away for later use. "I'm glad you walked away." "Me too, baby. Me too." At 17, Grace applied for college. "Law," she said. "I want to fight for people who can't prove what was done to them." "You're sure?" I asked, though my chest swelled with pride. "I was born sure," she said. That spring, Julian called. I almost didn't answer. "I just wanted to tell you," he said quietly. "I'm proud of her, of you, of both of us, maybe, for not letting it end in hate." "Maybe," I said, "but hate would have been easier." He laughed softly. "Yeah, easier never lasts." One night, Grace came home late from study group. She found me at the desk, poring over case files. "Still chasing numbers?" she teased. "Still chasing truth," I said. "Same thing." She grinned. She noticed the framed photo of her as a toddler on my desk, the one Julian had taken during a supervised visit years ago. "You kept that?" "I kept everything that reminded me I survived," I said, "even the parts that hurt." She leaned down, kissed my cheek. "You don't just survive, Mama, you build." That summer, the ocean threw a storm against our cliffs. Power flickered. Rain hit the windows sideways. I held a flashlight while Grace piled blankets in the living room. "It's like camping," she said. The thunder cracked hard enough to shake the floorboards. For a moment, I saw the old garden again, the flashbulbs, the noise, the stunned silence. But then Grace laughed, pure and alive, and the vision broke like glass. Maybe that was what healing finally looked like, not forgetting the thunder, but hearing laughter over it. Years pass, and the world softens around the edges. Grace is 20 now, taller than me, with her father's eyes and my stubborn chin. She's in her second year of law school, financial abuse and family law, of course. She calls every Sunday, voice bright, always multitasking, cooking, typing, living. Sometimes I listen to her talk and realize she's become everything I once prayed for without knowing what I was asking. Free, unapologetic, whole. She still asks about the wedding sometimes, the moment that turned our lives into public theater. "Do you ever wish it hadn't happened?" "No," I tell her, "because if it hadn't, you wouldn't exist, and I wouldn't have learned that peace isn't the absence of pain. It's the ability to walk through it without losing your name." Julian still sends birthday cards, handwritten, never long. "Proud of her. Hope you're well. Thank you for raising her right." We exchange polite updates through lawyers, how he's sober, stable, remarried still. Elise sends occasional photos. Their son, small and smiling, standing between them. I don't hate them. I don't love them either. I simply wish them quiet. The last time I saw Julian was at Grace's high school graduation. The court had lifted the supervision years earlier, but we'd kept things formal, boundaries intact. He sat 2 rows behind me, his wife's hand in his. When Grace walked across the stage, he stood and clapped until his palms went red. Our eyes met for a brief second. No bitterness left, just acknowledgement. 2 people who survived each other. I never remarried. There was someone once, a teacher at Grace's school, widowed, kind. His name was Daniel. He had a laugh that didn't ask for anything. We dated for years, quietly. No fireworks, no grand confessions, just gentle steadiness. He once told me, "You don't have to perform your healing for me." And I realized that was love too, the kind that doesn't demand proof. We still share a life, not a fairy tale, a partnership, a safe harbor. Quinn Forensics became something larger than I expected. We started offering free audits for women leaving controlling relationships, tracing hidden assets, secret accounts, the invisible chains money can forge. Every case felt like an echo of my own. The disbelief, the gaslighting, the math of manipulation. There's a moment I never forget, when a client realizes it's not her fault, when she sees, in the numbers, the story she's been living without words. That moment feels holy, like turning on a light in a long-locked room. I keep a folder of thank you letters, some typed, some handwritten, some stained with tears. One reads, "You saved my life, but the truth is, they saved mine, over and over. Every woman who walked into my office reminded me why I'd walked out of that garden." People still recognize me sometimes, at airports, in grocery stores, in auditoriums where I speak about financial trauma. They whisper, "You're her, aren't you? The bride who walked away." I smile, because yes, I am. But I'm also the woman who built something after the smoke cleared. The video still exists online, millions of views, countless think pieces. They call it the slap that started a movement. I used to flinch at the sight of it. Now I see it for what it was, a moment where silence broke its own neck. That day didn't ruin me, it revealed me. When Grace came home last Christmas, she found me working late. She dropped her bag, made hot chocolate, and sat across from me. "You know," she said, "I watched that video again." "Why torture yourself?" I asked, smiling. "Because it's not torture, it's history. You looked terrified, but you didn't move." "I couldn't afford to move," I said. "The moment I did, they would have written the story for me." "And instead, you wrote it yourself," she said. "That's what I want to do, for other people." She reached across the table, took my hand. "You didn't just survive, Mom," she said. "You showed me what surviving looks like when it grows up." I didn't have an answer for that. I just squeezed her hand, felt her pulse steady and strong against mine. The next morning, we went for a walk along the cliffs. The ocean below was loud, endless, unapologetic. Grace tossed a stone into the surf. "Do you ever think you'll tell the full story publicly, like a book?" "Maybe," I said. "But I think the story already told itself." "What do you mean?" "I mean it keeps living. Every time someone learns they're worth more than fear." She nodded, watching the waves crash. "You really think love can survive all that?" "Real love can," I said, "but not the kind that demands proof. Love doesn't shrink you. It lets you breathe." That evening, we cooked dinner, pancakes the way my uncle used to make them. She flipped one onto the floor, laughing. "He'd say that one's for the seagulls." I laughed too, and he'd be right. Later, after she went to bed, I stood at the window. The ocean was dark, moonlight carving silver paths across the surface. I thought of my mother, my uncle, Veronica, Julian, every ghost that had built this strange, beautiful aftermath. People often ask if I regret it. The slap, the walkout, the exposure, the years alone. I don't. Because every mistake, every betrayal, every headline led me here. To the quiet house by the cliffs. To Grace's laughter. To the woman who no longer needs to be saved. There's a power line near our street that hums at night when the wind's right. Sometimes I stand under it, listening. I think about the early days, how I used to fix broken circuits, keep the power on for others, how love, like electricity, can light or burn, depending on how you handle it. Now, when I hear that hum, I think of the cost of keeping the lights on, and how some things are worth the bill. I survived the slap. I built a life from the silence that followed. And in the end, that silence became a kind of music.